bags, raise the flags. Hit them fast, secure the bag. Don't even blink, make them walk the plank. Light them up, let's make them sing. Fire the cannons, fire the cannons, fire the cannons. On Bucs, yeah, we on. Fire the cannons, fire the cannons, fire the cannons. The whole field's our red zone. Let me give you 55 reasons why this is our season. Palm trees breezing, opposing teams bleeding.
All right, welcome back to Buc What You Heard. My name is Gene. You can reach me at Buc What You Heard. You follow me, of course, you know. I'll follow you back. I'm joined by my man Ted from Ted Talks Ball, 49ers podcast. Real great friend of the show. I've been on his show a few times and really enjoy talking football with you. How you doing today?
Good, Mean Gene. How you doing?
Oh man, slow motion. I'm glad we're getting closer to football. And it's this time of the year, along with the off season, the majority of the off season that I hate, because there's not really a whole lot to talk about. So it's really cool to get different creators on and, you know, kind of talk football and get your perspective on a lot of things.
Yeah, it's always fun, although probably a little more drama than we might like in Ninerland. There's always QB drama with us. It seems like every year there's some kind of drama. You know, this year it's Purdy's UCL. Will he be ready week 1? Supposedly Lance and Darnold are battling it out for the QB2 position. And so
is that a close battle? I mean, just from anything that you've heard, I'm not a huge Sam Darnold fan, so I don't know, you know, how he's adjusting to that offense over there.
Well, Adam Schefter went on the Pat McAfee show today, and he said that it was either his guess or he thinks that Sam Darnold is the front runner if Purdy isn't ready to go. Now, everything we're hearing from camp is that it is close, but that Lance has a slight edge. And ultimately, you know, if it's close, I think you give Lance the nod due to all the draft capital, due to the fact that Sam Darnold has, you know, 55 starts, 50 plus starts, and Lance has less than 5. You know, it's very easy to say that Lance is to be determined. Anyone calling him a bust after less than 5 games, there's so many QBs who look bad after 5 games.
You know, I've always believed that you have to give a rookie minimum 3 years. I would say more, but minimum 3 years. And in order to really know what you have, you know, with that player. And I've seen players that it's taken a little bit longer and they finally figured it out and they've turned out to be serviceable players. So I don't buy into the philosophy that, oh, after year 2, this guy's a bust and he's never going to amount to anything. There's a lot of different factors that go into that. For one, it could be the scheme that they're in. It could be the coaching. There's just so much that goes into it. And you may have coaches that coach, but you may have other coaches that teach. And it just depends on what kind of system you get into. Is it helpful to your growth? And then there are other people that are just like, okay, we're giving up on them. So it's going to really be interesting to see how that all plays out. That's definitely one of those. Niners is one of those teams I'll definitely be watching just to kind of see what's going to happen. Hey, what's going on, Donnie? How you doing? Thank you for checking us out. Thank you for chatting with us. And you know, I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on just the team as a whole. I mean, the defense really stood out last year, and then Brock Purdy was just an incredible story. You know, just putting him in and the fact that he made the most of his opportunity is what really impresses me. I love that. I love those stories about players that you don't really hear from. You don't know who they are. You don't know what you have, and all of a sudden they make the most of what they're given to work with.
Yeah, I mean, Purdy's a great story. Obviously, you know, Mr. Irrelevant. He's, you know, the last pick in the draft. He was the QB3 to start the season.
Right.
It took Trey Lance getting injured week 2 and then Jimmy G getting injured. I think it was week 13 when we played the Dolphins. And he came and he did really well. You know, he won 6 regular season games, 5 starts, because technically Jimmy G, you know, did the first drive of the Dolphins game before he got injured. But
yeah,
I count the Dolphins game. I say 6 regular season wins, 6-0. 2-0 in the playoffs against the Seattle Seahawks, our bitter division rival, to make it a 3-0 sweep of them
And
this
that's tough.
season. That's
that
really tough. We haven't even done a 2-0 sweep of them since 2011. Russ was like 17-4 against us, so that was huge to sweep them regular season and then to cap it off with the postseason win. The Cowboys obviously have a really good defensive line. They got Micah Parsons. They had I think it's BJ Armstrong who had 8.5 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously had Trayvon Diggs, who's a hell of a corner. Very underrated defense for the Dallas Cowboys. I know you don't really like them very much, just like I don't, right?
Oh, how'd you hear about that?
I remember that from us chatting before. A common foe of ours, me from the 90s. The Seahawks have overtaken them now on my hated list, but not by much. The Cowboys are right there. I'll tell you what, the Eagles are creeping up pretty fast too, though.
Oh yeah, but their fans are horrible to begin with, man. They eat their young, so
no doubt. And then Purdy got injured in the NFC Championship game against the Eagles. Hassan Reddick hit his arm as it was coming forward and bent it back.
Yeah.
Tore his UCL. So he's only the second quarterback ever to have this UCL repair plus internal brace surgery. And the only other quarterback, NFL QB who's had it is Nick Mullins, oddly enough. And it happened in a similar play on the road. Purdy was on the road at the Link. Mullins was on the road at Jerry's World, and it was DeMarcus Lawrence instead of Hassan Reddick coming around the right edge and hitting his arm in a very similar fashion. They're both smaller statured QBs, shorter, smaller. And so there's not much data on QBs for this. So everybody's saying we're hoping he's back week 1, and I'm just like, I just hope he's back at some point fairly early in the season. I don't think week 1 is super realistic, because put it this way, with Nick Mullins, let me ask you, Gene, can you say that 2.5 years later we are now since Nick Mullins had his done, would you say he's 100%? Do you even know?
I can't say that he's ever been the same.
Right. And so you really can't say it 6 months after, like what we're trying to push Purdy into. So when you're watching all the stuff about Purdy, here's a bit of advice from an insider, or this is what I'm going to do about it. Because Kyle's saying one thing, Lynch is saying another, the national media, something else, local media, everybody's got a different opinion. Listen to Purdy, because he's been like, hey, I don't know if I'll play this season. I'm not sure. And when he says I'm ready to play week 1, that's when I'll believe it. Anybody else is pushing an agenda. Kyle likes to do misdirection. Yeah. So anyway, so great story about Purdy. Things to keep in mind, though, is, limited arm, limited height, and limited top speed. He's got everything else is pretty outstanding with him. He's super quick.
I really appreciated his decision making, in the pocket.
Decision making, accuracy, pocket presence, leadership, you name it. I mean, he's got everything else, all the intangibles. But the thought with Lance is like, hey, if he can learn the intangibles, and most of those are learnable, like then he's 6'4" with a cannon of an arm, right? And he's not as quick, but he is faster top speed. And that can actually affect the defense more because it forces someone to spy him. Whereas you don't have to spy Purdy. He can beat somebody for a step or two, but as soon as he starts running, people are chasing him down from behind. Yeah. So I really like Purdy. But I kind of like Lance a little bit better just because of this upside, this potential.
I was going to ask you about that.
It just seems to be so much higher, and so we'll see what happens. But I mean, will Lance beat him out week 1? I don't know. Will Purdy be ready week 1? I don't know. I had a doctor on who's from UCSF, very renowned, med school out here on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. He's also one of the big Bay Area radio station injury expert, Dr. Pandya. He said he thought week 3 would be the soonest that we'd see Purdy. But again, these are all guesses. We don't know. Most of the data is on pitchers, and guess what? Pitching from a mound is very different than throwing a football from a crowded pocket where you got 300-pound monsters trying to tear you limb from limb.
Yeah.
So
the mechanics are the same, but just the overall.
No, even the mechanics are different. The pitcher is pitching out here, and there's a ton of torque and whip on that UCL. So it's actually, you need it for the. So that's why some of them actually get stronger after they have it done. Whereas a quarterback throws more straight ahead. It's more for stability, but you don't see the repetitive stress injuries in football from partly because you just don't throw as many footballs as pitches, but partly because the mechanics are slightly different. It leads you to believe that a football player should be okay, but there's also like, okay, you're physically okay, but then Gene, you got to get synced up with your weapons, right?
Right.
And you got to get
Mhm.
And you also got to be, like I was saying, mentally ready to stand in that pocket and wait till the last possible second, knowing that you're going to get drilled till you're, wait for your guy to pop open.
And mentally, you have to be ready because the thought of getting re-injured, after all that rehab, I'm sure that it sits in somebody's mind.
Jimmy
Just
G was never the same
yeah,
after his ACL, so
yeah,
we
that's
have
pretty
firsthand
wild. I
experience
mean,
of that.
and he didn't pass his physical, I don't believe, or
He did not pass his physical with the Raiders, and they knew that before they signed him, so they changed his deal. So there's zero guaranteed money. If he doesn't pass that physical, they could release him with no, 2023 cap implications or moving forward, no cap implications, period. And then I'm like, oh God, could he be coming back? Because most of us in Niner Land are happy that he's gone,
yeah.
and we just want a clean break from Jimmy G. But it's hard to imagine that if he was available, if later on he passes physical, that Kyle wouldn't be like, oh, I'd rather have Jimmy G than Sam Darnold, because
Yeah.
as much as I don't like Jimmy G, I'd probably still take him over Darnold as a backup.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Anyway, so that's sort of the QB situation in San Francisco. Darnold, I think he can do a little bit better than he's done. I just don't think he'll ever be great, but maybe he'll surprise me. We'll see.
I think he's going to be that stereotypical journeyman quarterback that somebody would be serviceable for a few games, but not somebody that you would depend on to take you to the Super Bowl.
I sure hope not. I say don't bet your rent money. That's what I like to tell people about things like that.
So we're in Tampa. Tampa is dealing with, I wouldn't say a similar situation, but with Tom Brady moving on, we're sitting here with Kyle Trask out of University of Florida. He was a second round pick, and then you have Baker Mayfield, who they brought in. What you have to factor in all this is the Bucs were horrible when it came to the cap. I think with the departure of Tom Brady and the way the cap was set up, the Bucs did not have a lot of money to work with. So getting a quarterback in here, and I know, and it's so funny here in Bucs Nation, everything is polarizing. So I was never genuinely a fan of Baker Mayfield, other than when he was at OU and stuck the spear in the middle of the O for Ohio State. I was good with that. But after that, I mean, just seriously, when he got into the NFL, I always felt he was inconsistent and he was too emotional. And there were times where he would play good, and there were other times where his play would fall off. He would get into it with a media personality. He would come out and play lights out. Then he would kind of balance out and play good. Then he would have a bad game. So he's never, throughout his career that I've seen, been that consistent. So it's going to be interesting to see with our new offensive coordinator, how he fits into this system. And I know that what they're really working on doing here in Tampa is really simplifying the offense and making it user friendly and playing out the strengths of the players that we have, such as a Mike Evans or a Chris Godwin, or some of the offensive weapons that Tampa has.
Well, let me ask you this, Gene: is he still making a lot of commercials?
I have not. I've seen pictures of him at baseball games more so than commercials. And
because like that was one of my knocks on him early on. I was like, boy, he's really good at commercials. I wonder how good he'd be at QB if he was spending his time practicing that instead.
yeah,
And I think maybe now that he's, a little bit of luster's come off, he's probably not so marketable as he once was. And that could be a bonus for you guys if he's really dedicated. I mean, I'll put it this way. When he came available, I really wanted him for the Niners, and the Rams blocked us. There's a word that rhymes with block that people use
chop block
for that. Yeah, chop block, something more even worse.
Block.
Yeah, rock block. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
No,
and they did that. They did that because they had no use for him. They were already out of the playoffs, and they kept us from getting him. And I definitely believe he would have done better than Josh Johnson did in that NFC Championship game if he'd come in behind Purdy. I don't think it would have been enough to maybe beat the Eagles, but it might have been enough to make it a much better game. Ultimately, the problem that any QB was going to have coming in to that game was lack of reps. because that was clearly what happened to Josh Johnson. He just didn't even know how to run the plays. He looked just like lost.
Yeah.
So I think
But,
Baker's more talented, but I don't know how far that would have carried us.
And just kind of going back to Josh Johnson, who started here in Tampa, many years ago. You would think, as a professional football player who's been in the league, played with multiple offensive coordinators, you would be able to. And I think the reason they brought him in was because he was a serviceable veteran and somebody that you could bring in, and he wouldn't be shell shot by the situation. The playoffs. This is huge implications here. You got to go out and do your thing. But you're right. He looked lost. And I have to give some credit to the Eagles defense and
D line
do as well. And again, it was just that perfect storm, and he wasn't able to really get it done. But I kind of want to go back to, talking about Baker. What drew you when you were looking at, oh man, Baker Mayfield's available. We need to bring him in. What was it about Baker Mayfield that you saw that made you say, wow, I think he would be a great fit here for what we're trying to do at this moment?
I wasn't sure he'd be a great fit for our scheme, but I think the Browns did run a similar scheme. Was Stefanski their OC or head coach at one point? So I thought it was a similar scheme. So that right away is always good for Kyle if someone knows how to run his scheme. Kyle is a great X's and O's guy, and he does run a great scheme, but he's not really great at fitting it to people's strengths and weaknesses. He's much better at picking someone who fits his scheme, if you know what I mean. Like finding someone who's a fit.
Like that's kind of Gruden-esque, because I think that's pretty much how John Gruden was. John Gruden couldn't go out and draft a quarterback, bring him in, teach him his system, and make him successful. The majority of his time, he had to get a veteran that kind of knew the game, bring him in, like a Rich Gannon when he had Rich Gannon. And he was able to use Rich Gannon at that time to, really move that offense forward. So I think that's something that we're kind of seeing. Well, I would have to say that Brock may be the exception to the rule with just how he's come out and adjusted to everything, for the Niners.
Well, I mean, I think he's kind of not too different than Jimmy G, not too different than some of the other. I mean, definitely Matt Ryan had a much bigger arm than either of those two guys. But that could be part of the problem we're running into with Lance, is that he just doesn't really know what to do with mobile quarterbacks. He runs them like fullbacks,
right.
And that's just not the best way to keep somebody standing upright in the NFL. But yeah, I like Baker has a big arm. I like that he's a fiery personality. And I was going more off the highs than the lows. I was hoping he could, level out some of the one thing that was going to be an issue was Nick Bosa in the locker room, because after Baker planted the flag on the Ohio State Bosa figuratively planted it on him when he sacked him at Levi's. And it was a huge meme going around Twitter forever. Yeah. So I don't know, that Baker, you good, I don't know how that would have gone over in the locker room, but I like I said, I just would have been a lot more excited about Baker Mayfield coming into that NFC Championship game than Josh Johnson. So I don't know. I think you guys are in good hands. I feel like Trask, a lot of people in Ninerland like Trask coming. I don't know a lot, but I knew a few at least that liked Trask coming out and felt like he was a really good value. So maybe he can step up too.
Yeah. Again, we haven't gotten to really see a whole lot of him because, Tom Brady was the starting quarterback. So there was.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of that, you mentioned that you guys are in cap hell a little bit right now. But, most teams would take a little bit of cap hell to have a 2020 Super Bowl ring. I like to give the Rams grief because, we've beaten them 8 times in a row in the regular season. Mm-hmm. But the one time they beat us in the playoffs, they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. So I think a lot of Niner fans would trade places with them too. They went 5-12 last year. I don't see them doing much better than 5-12 this year. And a lot of Niners fans would gladly take that rather than, we're really happy to have gone to 3 NFC championships in the last 4 years, 1 Super Bowl, but we lost them all. So, I guess we won 1 NFC championship to get to the Super Bowl, but then we lost that. So,
So I have to ask you, and that's kind of segueing into, you kind of stole a little bit of my thunder, but that was one of my questions that I wanted to ask you. I mean, with the Niners, with the legacy of the Niners going back to the 80s, and just, off and on, they've always developed these teams, had great coaches throughout the years, and then you're kind of running into uh, I guess kind of a drought in a sense, as far as Super Bowl victories. Would you bet the farm and have to deal with mediocrity for years if you had a chance to get that next Lombardi trophy? Would it be worth it as a fan?
I mean, for the chance, I feel like we've got a chance every year. So no,
Right.
I wouldn't bet the farm. Well, but for a better chance, yeah, I probably would.
Listen,
Everybody says,
I guess
"Would you trade
what
the ring?" And of course, you trade the ring, but there's no guarantees. I mean, look how close the Rams were to not getting their ring.
Mm.
If Drop Tart, Jaquiski Tart, our
Yeah.
safety, hadn't dropped that interception
Mhm.
in that NFC Championship game at Levi's South, there, otherwise known as SoFi Stadium. You know, it could have been a whole different game. It could have been us there. I'm not gonna say we would have beat the Bengals though, and I can go into that more if you want. But
Well, yeah, we could touch on that here in a little bit, but I guess I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you were guaranteed, you knew that if you bet the farm, you're
yeah,
going to get
I would do it. I would take 5 years, at least 5 years of mediocrity for the ring, because for us it's been 29 years, and we had five. We were 5-0 in Super Bowls too. And, we just got so used to that. And then all of a sudden now the last two we've gone to, we lost to the Ravens and to the Chiefs. It's pretty bitter pill. The one way I wouldn't take the Super Bowl win is if the refs handed it to us. And I do feel like, I don't know if we've talked about that before, but I'm definitely
we actually haven't. This is kind of interesting. Because and I'm going to say this, and I'm going on record saying this, and I stand by what I'm saying. I do not have a whole lot of trust in referees' integrity in this game right now. And then you couple in sports betting, and it's totally, it's made it even worse. It's 10 times worse. I don't believe that sometimes that the refs are, on the level. And I know people are like, man, the game is so fast. How can a ref make a change the landscape of a game? And, there's always holding in the offensive line. You can find a holding call on almost every single play, if not every single play. There's stuff that goes on during the game that you could easily call. And so I stand by this. I've seen times where the refs are watching this play and they're just like, oh, okay, no harm, no foul. And it was a huge play. And so I just kind of, when I hear about the refs and I look at the referee crews, that's something I just started, I would say, in the past 3 years, looking at who is the referee crew that's going to be reffing the game that the Bucs are playing. So, it's just, I don't know, it's frustrating.
It is. Yeah, and it's been pretty highlighted in the last few Super Bowls too. I can walk you through my sort of ref agenda thing. But before I go into specific examples, I'll just speak in some generalities and just say, look, if you don't believe it, I'd always say follow the Benjamins, right? Look at the money. And if a game goes up 21 or 28 points, people change the channel. So the refs in the NFL have a vested interest to keep games close, to keep people tuned in, to keep them watching the ads that bring in the revenue. And to keep people in the seats. People will leave the stadium as well too. But mostly it's the TV revenue. And they also tend to favor big name QBs. I'll say Brady, I think, was one. Rodgers is another.
Statistically, I would say the last 2 seasons, not so much, but normally I would tend to agree with you. But yeah,
maybe it was more early on. All right, but I did notice it in you guys' Super Bowl against the Chiefs, where there were, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there were a couple of pass interference calls in the first half that led to touchdowns by the Bucs, where I thought they were uncatchable balls. And I guess maybe that's hard to determine when there's a holding where they could have got to or whatever. But to me, it looked like clearly uncatchable balls, PI. And then obviously the Bucs had it in hand in the second half, so no need to help them at that point. But I'll say, before that, with the Kansas City Chiefs, they were one of the more penalized holding teams against arguably the best defensive line in 2019 in the San Francisco 49ers. Not one holding call the whole game. And I'm not saying they handed the Chiefs the game, because what they did is They let him back in, and then Mahomes won it. Then they did go ahead and run away with it. Or like with the Rams and the Bengals, it was like no flags, no flags, no flags, including like um, so let's see. There was a holding on a Rams on a Bengals receiver early in the game, and it
Was it
caused
T.
them to kick.
Higgins?
It was Higgins going across the
Was it T.
middle, and I
Higgins?
think
I think it was T. Higgins. Yeah.
it was T. Higgins, and and it caused them to get a field goal. And then later in the second half, there was a holding, a PI, clear face mask on a Rams receiver that wasn't called. So they just let them. Those are no calls, to kind of make up calls, if you will. Yeah. The whole point was no call, no call, no call, no call. And then right towards the end, looks like the Rams are going to stall out on the drive they needed to, come from behind to win. And all of a sudden, the flags came flying in bunches. And all of a sudden, boom, TD Rams win. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but Stan Kroenke has 4 teams that won rings in the last year and a half.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you could say it's good management, or you could say he's super wealthy and maybe he greased the skids a little. Yeah. I mean, you got the Rams, you got the Colorado Avalanche, obviously just the Nuggets, and then I don't know. There's like a lacrosse. I don't know if you even count lacrosse, but basketball, football, and hockey are pretty big. Especially football is king. Yeah. So, and then, and then even this last year, there was talk about obviously Bradbury getting that holding call late in the game. But ultimately, like, he had done that several times in the game and hadn't gotten called. Yeah. And really, I think the Eagles were the ones that were getting all the calls. The one that killed me, Gene, I don't know if you heard this, but was do you remember the Mind of a Center or something like that? That the tight end who was a former Panthers tight end, Greg Olsen.
Greg Olsen.
Greg Olsen, the commentator, and Lane Johnson was constantly false starting. He did it against us, and he did it against the Chiefs. And he's like, oh, he's just in the center's head. It's like, no, dude, he's false starting. it's like, and they're just letting it go. They're letting it go. Yeah. And it's funny because there was a picture from Tight End U today, and I used that as one of my captions. It was like Kittle and Kelsey and Gronk and Olsen lined up. And I said, of course I say Kittle's the GOATE is the greatest of all tight ends, and I know most people think Kelsey.
Oh, you I don't know what you attract controversy, and I didn't realize I did not realize that about you. And again, guys, this is my man Ted. Ted Talks Ball. You could go look for him on YouTube. Definitely like and subscribe. Great show, great content, and thank you again for coming on. I just noticed that about you. I follow you on Twitter, and me. And during the off season, I'm pretty random. I'm talking about random stuff, but as we get closer to the NFL, you'll start to see me more buckle down to talk more about Bucs football. But the one thing that I know about you and I've seen, I'll take shots at, like, I think Dallas is probably the only team I'll take shots at on a regular basis on Twitter. But anybody else, I'm just like, oh, okay, whatever. I don't know. I normally don't mix it up back and forth. Some guy DM'd me today because I made a comment about Dallas. Dallas has been on the decline since Blockbuster and VHS movies were a thing. And so he's like, oh, Bucs fans, you're going to talk, you're going to say all this stuff. And I'm like, well, considering the last time, Dallas won a Super Bowl, I mean, New Kids on the Block was they were the it thing, so
well, Gene, that was a year after we won. So it's been 28 years for them. It's been 29 years for us. So trust me, we get the same stuff. The only difference is we got all these NFC championships and 2 Super Bowls, 7 NFC championships and 2 Super Bowls that we've been to, but we didn't get any rings. So the Cowboys say we won just as many sitting at home. So
yeah, so it is what it is. But now, just how delusional the fan base is, they annoy the heck out of me. But that's for another time. Real quick, I'm going to jump on some of these questions here.
Help yourself.
Yeah, so Donnie was asking about Shaq Barrett. I know Shaq Barrett had that Achilles injury, and he's coming off of. And again, guys, that is a horrific injury. I can tell you just from the people that I know that have had that injury, it takes over a year to get to some semblance of normality. It's not going to be like a ACL or something a knee injury. This is a totally different injury. This is where your explosion comes from, and I would temper your expectations for him. I think eventually he will get back to some to close to where he was, if anything. But right now, I would just say, kind of temper your expectations with him. He is going to work his way back. I mean, a great example of that was Chris Godwin. I can't say that I'm not comparing the two things. I'm just giving you an example. Chris Godwin, with the knee injury he suffered, you didn't really get to see the true Chris Godwin until more towards the back end of the season. So when it comes to Shaq, just kind of temper your expectations and don't expect the Shaq Barrett that you're used to seeing being disruptive and hunting quarterbacks. But I think eventually he will get to that. So Donnie, by the way, thank you so much. These are really great questions. How do you feel about the secondary? I think the starters are fine. My concern is depth. We've seen it over the past couple of seasons where the injury at the wrong time can really derail a secondary, and then you're playing catch up and you're having to readjust your defense to cover up glaring deficiencies. So I like what you see with the starters, but it's just the backups and the depth is going to be a huge concern for me as far as that goes.
Part of the reason why Brock Purdy looked so good against y'all that when we played was both safeties of the Bucs were out, and so was Sean Murphy Bunting, and then Vita Vea went down on like the first drive, or certainly really early in the first quarter, and so like people are saying, "Oh, Bucs are a top 10 defense." I'm like, the defense that Brock Purdy beat was not top 10 with all those guys missing. Vita Vea is arguably one of the best defensive tackles in the game, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think
he's
as an outsider, I would say that. Yeah.
So, and Donnie comes with another question. Do you think Rashad White rushes for 1,000 yards this season? I'm gonna lay that a little bit more on the offensive line. I think last year there were some really glaring holes in the offensive line with injuries to Ryan Jensen. And you're moving Tristan Wirfs to another position, so it's going to be interesting to see how this offensive line starts to gel. You're moving on from Donovan Smith, who is a really, despite all the false starts and holding calls that this guy got, he was a great run blocker, and I think that was one of his strengths. As far as pass blocking, miss me with that. I don't think he was that guy. But I'm really hoping that the players that they have in place right now and the depth that they have will actually, open up some holes for Rashad White to really make some plays. I think he's got nice hands, and I think that with a great offensive scheme, I think he can really get up there. 1,000 yards, I'm not sure. I personally, as looking at him, I would say he could get close. He might get it, but for me, no, I'm not sure. I can't say that I believe that he would.
Tristan Wirfs, the one that got away.
Oh my
You
God.
guys, you guys may not remember that was our pick that
I know.
traded back. We traded back one, and we got the pick that helped us move up to get Ayuk, but we ended up with Kinlaw instead of Wirfs. And oh, what a difference that makes, because now we're starting Colton McKivitz as our right tackle this season. And this will be his first ever start in the NFL at right tackle. He filled in pretty well for Trent Williams a couple times at left tackle. And he played okay at guard some in 2020. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous about right tackle for us. And Tristan Wirfs is arguably the best or second best right tackle in the game. It's either him or Lane Johnson any day. In my opinion.
What's interesting, what was the thought process to pass on Tristan Wirfs?
Well, we had Mike McGlinchey, who we had drafted not too long before. I think we took him in 2018, number 9 overall. And we were in the process of trading for Trent Williams. And
Okay.
I think it was sort of like, I think people thought that Wirfs wanted to be a left tackle. And, if you've got Trent Williams, you can't have Wirfs at left tackle. Yeah, it was. And put it this way, too. I mean, what was he, the fourth or fifth tackle taken in that draft?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I think he was the last. He was the last good one. That was actually.
Yeah. So, a lot of people, whiffed on Wirfs, if you will. So I don't think anybody thought he was going to be as good as he is. I think
Yeah.
that's fair to say.
Mhm.
He had that one video of him jumping out of the pool, that was
That
pretty
was
incredible.
incredible. I tried
Yeah.
to do that, man, and I almost killed myself trying to. I tried to do that in like 3 feet of water, and it's not happening.
I don't
This
think
guy,
I'd try it
this
without the water.
guy
Yeah, I
too much
mean,
next
brutal.
thing to try.
Brutal.
So, for you guys, and I, while we're talking about the draft, how would you grade your draft for this season? How do you guys think you did? Do you think that your team uh took care of deficiencies or made upgrades or added depth to your team?
Well, when you grade our draft, you got to start with our first round pick was Lance,
Mhm.
and our second and third round picks were Christian McCaffrey. And then I guess the fourth round pick will be in 2024 for McCaffrey. So that was the McCaffrey package.
Right.
So, with that in mind, we did pretty well in the draft. Obviously, we're still waiting on Lance. A lot of people are saying bust. I'm saying
It's
TBD.
too early. It is too early.
It is.
And
This is something I meant to get back to earlier. And
just let me put this out here. You kind of have to shut down the conversation and stop the conversation right there if somebody's automatically declaring him a bust just based on his situation and where everything sits right now.
yeah, I mean, essentially with Lance, you got to look at it this way. Rookie season, we redshirted him because he's extremely raw. Some people don't know he only had 17 starts in college, and that was Division One AA, not Division One. NDSU is a great school, but their opponents weren't so hot, so not exactly great competition. So rookie season redshirted, but then Jimmy G got injured a couple times, so he came in against the Cards, looked bad. Came in against the Texans, looked good. Real good, actually, 124 passer rating. And then ultimately, season two, he broke his ankle in the second game against the Seahawks, first
Yeah.
quarter of the second game. So, and the other thing to keep in mind when they're trying to compare Purdy and Lance, I mean, some people may be like, dude, look at Lance. He has a 55% completion percentage and all this stuff. And Purdy's a 107 passer rating and he got all those wins and everything. But keep in mind that Purdy had CMC. Right. And he was an absolute huge difference maker in our offense. We were 23rd in the league when he joined, and we ended up close to first with CMC for DVOA. And Lance barely had Kittle also. He didn't have Kittle for the Cards game, didn't have him for the Bears game. Obviously no CMC because we didn't have him yet in the Bears game. When he did have him, which was the Texans in the second half of the Seahawks game where Jimmy got injured in 2021, he had like a 116 passer rating, which is better than Purdy's. It's a small sample size, I know. Some of it was garbage time against the Seahawks. I know that too. But ultimately, there are reasons. So basically, Lance barely ever played when the team wasn't struggling. We started 2021 3-5. We started 2022 3-4. That was all of Lance's starts except for the Texans, where we're doing well. And he won a must-have game to keep us in the playoff hunt. To get us into the 2021 playoffs, where we ended up ultimately losing to the Rams in the NFC Championship game. So those are reasons why. Also, Lance has reworked his mechanics. Apparently, he has more touch, more accuracy, a faster delivery. So those are all reasons why we really don't know what Lance is with this setup, with his better mechanics.
I would love to see him. I would love to see him with the first team. I would love to see him, with CMAC and with some of your other weapons just to see what he can do, because the man is, he can still make plays with his legs. I love his upside. I know we say that. I know normally, like when it comes to Tampa, I hate the word. I hate some of those words where you talk about players and what they could do, their potential. That's the word I was thinking of, potential. But when you get to see some of this stuff, I really would love to see him with the first team and kind of see what he can do.
Yeah, I mean, because Purdy was good enough for us in 2022 to make us a contender, clearly. I mean, you could say, or I have been saying, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, if Purdy stays healthy against the Eagles, I'm saying that game's probably a coin flip.
Mm.
And if we win the coin flip and go to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, probably a little bit worse than a coin flip, maybe 45-55 or 40-60.
Mhm.
But like if Lance can get close to a ceiling or hit it, like we're dog walking the Eagles and
Yeah.
maybe favorites against the Chiefs. And so that's why. And also, like, we were super healthy in the 2022
Yeah.
playoffs. I mean, we were basically missing Emmanuel Mosley and a
That
bunch of
was true.
quarterbacks. We were
Yes.
missing Jimmy and Lance. But if you say Purdy is the best quarterback or had the best 2022 of any of our quarterbacks, then we're not missing those QBs until Purdy gets injured.
Yep.
So, in Mosley's spot, Diamador Lenore came in and played really well. Not right at first, but by the end of the season, he was playing really well. Maybe he was even better than Charvarius Ward in the playoffs. So, the chances of that happening again in 2023 are pretty slim, especially for the Niners. I don't know if you guys know about your rest days, but we're acutely aware of it in San Francisco this year because we're minus 20 rest days on the season. And there are three teams at plus 12. There are the Jets and the Bears, and I forget the third team. So they all three of those teams have 32 more rest days than us in a 3.5, 4 month season. So that's a huge advantage. So, like, I think you were asking what's my outlook for the season. If you wanted my prediction before I learned all that stuff, I would have said, based off our draft and based off and I'll circle back to that because I know we've gotten away from that here.
Mhm.
But based off, I was saying like 13-4, like we did last season, or 12-5, maybe if we don't do quite as well as I thought. But with that rest situation, the fourth most rest is the Baltimore Ravens at +9. So they're 29 days more rest than us. And we play them late in the season in Baltimore. And late in the season is when that rest really starts to catch up to you. So I'm going to switch my prediction of us beating the Ravens to us losing, and I'll knock us down to 12-5. I think, I'm not going to say best case scenario, but realistic best case. And then maybe 11-6 if I was a little too bullish.
So yeah, I'm looking at this. So it was the Jets, Chicago, and Washington. And then
Washington, I
right
forgot.
below them, one game below them is Tennessee, and then you've got Cleveland, and
Oh,
then you have Baltimore.
there we go. That's okay. So they're fifth. Okay, sixth.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Okay,
then that's
but still they're +9, right, or
plus
+7?
9. Exactly. That's a plus
Yeah,
9.
that's a lot.
And
I
then
mean,
you've
well,
got,
it's a lot when we're minus 20. It's 29 days.
that's
Uh,
crazy.
it's crazy. Yeah, we
And
got jammed on that. And also, like last year, we had one of the easier schedules, and this year we're middle of the pack on schedule. So just the quality of opponents has gone up for us this year too.
yeah.
Otherwise, I think the Niners are better. You talked about what did I think of the draft. So I kind of got lost when we were talking about Lance and McCaffrey as the first two picks
Mhm.
in our draft, taking our first, second, and third draft picks. But ultimately, like, we drafted a kicker, Jake Moody.
Mhm.
And, a lot of people say third round draft pick, you can't do it. Don't do it.
Mhm.
But, we needed a kicker. We weren't going to pay, gold anymore.
Right.
And he's basically the only starter from that whole draft class. So that's the way you got to look at our draft class. They're all developmental players. They're all, our first pick was just before that. Moody was 99.
Mhm.
Just before that, we had Jair Brown from Penn State, the safety, at
Right.
87. He'll probably play some, but I doubt he'll unseat Tashawn Gibson, who had 5 picks last year. He was really good for us.
So with these draft picks, there's a lot of depth and I think depth and competition for backup positions is kind of how you would have to view this draft.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, let's see. Jair Brown will probably play some 3 safety packages as long as Gibson and Hufanga are healthy. But Hufanga had a lot of injury issues in college, so that could be an issue. What else? So let's just go down the list. So, Cameron Latu, he'll play some. He might be our tight end too.
Okay.
Third round pick out of Alabama. I'll tell you, the one thing about Jair Brown that kind of broke my heart was 6 picks later, the Steelers took Darnell Washington,
I
the monster
know.
tight
I
end out of
know.
Georgia. And he was a draft crush of mine. I knew he was raw, but man, he's just so big and strong. And he had that one-handed grab at the combine. And what he did to that blocking sled, it was like child's play playing with that thing. He looked like a tackle. But anyway, hopefully that doesn't come back as something to worry about. Then we took a guy named Darrell Luter out of Southern Alabama, developmental, maybe nickel, maybe boundary corner. D Winters out of TCU, really fast. So here's the deal: we took 2 linebackers. D Winters is kind of a Dre Greenlaw clone.
Mm-hmm.
And Jalen Graham out of Purdue was our last pick of the draft. He's very similar measurements
Mm-hmm.
to Fred Warner.
Right.
But again, I think both of them will probably have to develop some. We've got maybe some better guys in front of them. Ronnie Bell out of Michigan, wide receiver. He'll be fighting for the number 5 or number 6 spot if we carry 6 wide receivers.
Right.
With Danny Gray. I think there are 5 and 6.
So who are who are your day one number 4 receive 1 through 4 receivers for the Niners?
Yeah, Deebo Samuel, number 1.
Right.
Even though people call him a wide back, when he's healthy and playing well, he is an absolute difference maker. He had 1,400 receiving yards in 2021. I think he's going to do something like that again this year. He got into a little trouble last year holding in to get his contract. And he couldn't really go for it because, like you were talking about, Shaq tearing his ACL or his Achilles, or an ACL or patellar tendon or quad tear, anything like that happens to Deebo, he's not getting that contract, that $23 million a year he got. Right. So I don't blame him. He got what he deserved, and we unfortunately ended up with a down year because of it. So Deebo, Ayuk, and some people might say Ayuk's number 1 because he's much more of a pure receiver. But he'll be second on the depth chart.
Okay.
Then Jennings will be number 3.
Okay.
Out of Tennessee. And then Ray McLeod will be number 4, our kick returner. And he's kind of like our Deebo when Deebo was out. He helped do some trick plays and what have you. That's my prediction for there. The tight ends is a lot trickier because you got Kittle, and then you got Warner and Dwelly are the incumbents, but we drafted 2 tight ends, so clearly we're not real happy with them. The other one besides Latu is Braden Willis, who a lot of people are really excited about, 7th round pick out of Oklahoma, really athletic, and but he also might not end up as a tight end. He might end up being a Juice Check replacement because we got a couple guys that might replace Juice. Braden Willis being one. Another one is an undrafted guy named Jack Coletto out of Oregon State. Okay. And he's this real Swiss Army knife. You could say like a Taysom Hill type of guy, but Taysom Hill is much more athletic. Jack is more of what you just call a football player. He's really skilled, not quite as athletic though as like a Taysom Hill.
So I do want to ask you, when we're on the subject of the draft and just the overall organization, what are your thoughts on John Lynch? John Lynch is one of my all-time favorite Buccaneer players.
You got to meet him. I love that story.
So I mean, he holds a special place in my heart. John Lynch always will. But I wanted to know, since he's come to the Niners, how has he been a positive or a negative as far as the moves that have been made, or is it pretty much kind of a wash is where it comes to John Lynch? Because he's very polarizing too. I've heard certain Niner fans don't like him and want to move on. And I've asked, well, who do you replace him with?
Adam Peters is on the staff. He does most of the scouting.
Mm-hmm.
John Lynch is great. He's more of kissing babies and shaking hands. He's sort of the liaison between Jed York and Kyle. But Kyle does have final say on all personnel decisions. They say that it's like a joint decision.
Yeah.
But for QB and wide receiver, Kyle's making those decisions for sure. Okay. Maybe for defense, Lynch has more input. I don't want to poo-poo him at all. I mean, ultimately, you know these decisions, right? Oh, I hope that's not me. Lost you there for a second, or maybe you lost me.
Oh no, you're fine now. I can see you.
Okay. I mean, ultimately, you never really know who's making those decisions most of the time. But I think like Solomon Thomas took a class with John Lynch at Stanford, and so that was one of our big draft whiffs. But like the guy, he's done great things. You know, he and Kyle together, I give them both credit. They've been a great duo. They've yin to the yang, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Kyle is a lot of things, but he's not like real rah rah. Lynch is much more rah rah. I think that's why all our DCs have been real rah rah, like Robert Sala,
Yeah.
D'Amico Ryans, and now Steve Wilkes coming over to us from the Panthers. They're all boisterous, vocal,
I love, and that's
rah
another
rah type
that's
of
another
leaders.
story right there. Is Steve Wilkes. I think Steve Wilkes has gotten fucked over throughout screwed over throughout the NFL. I mean, starting with Arizona. I think the Arizona screw job was the worst thing that I've ever seen happen to a coach, and then for him to go over to
Yeah,
Carolina, and you have to deal with the monstrosity that is Matt Rule, and then you come in and turn your team around from what Matt Rule has been doing, and you get this team to buy into what you're trying to sell, and then they turn around and bring in another head coach, and I'm
Frank
just
Reich.
glad.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad he's in a place where hopefully he can thrive. And I love his defensive philosophy. I just don't feel like he's ever had, number one, the time to put things together, and number two, I don't feel like he's had the personnel that he really needed to make his defense work. So I'm really interested to see what Wilkes does with this defense, and how far he can really take them.
yeah. Well, we added a piece, just a little piece on the D line, Javon Hargrave, who I think is going to go really well with Nick
Oh,
Bosa.
a
We
very
are
small piece. Yeah.
very small piece. God, the guy's thick. Holy smokes, the guy's got like thick with like 6 C's.
Yeah.
And then you know we already had Eric Armstead. He's a really solid
Uh,
defensive tackle, especially against the
yeah.
run. Not much of a pass rusher. And then Drake Jackson on the other end of Bosa. Supposedly he gained 13 pounds of muscle. He came in and did pretty well. He had about 2 or 3 sacks in a short number of games and 5 or 6 batted balls, which is huge. People tend to overlook those, but a lot of times that can stop a drive more than a sack, or the same as a sack. Just you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
have the lost yardage. But so we've got Drake Jackson potentially on that side, but we got other options. Austin Bryant from the Lions, who's kind of a D Ford type speed rusher.
Mhm.
We drafted Robert Beal. That's the only draft pick I don't think I've talked about yet. Fifth rounder out of Georgia, who's got a real fast first step and real fast top speed for a defensive end. And then Cleveland Farrell, excuse me.
Mhm.
And so he and Austin Bryant actually played together at Clemson on the national championship team with Trevor Lawrence. So they both have already won a game at Levi's, where the Natty was played that year. And Cleveland Farrell's a pretty solid guy. He could set the edge. I just think he was didn't have much help on the Raiders. Max Crosby's a nice player, don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
nothing compared to Nick Bosa. So, and obviously Hargrave, there's nobody like that on the Raiders. So we got some good options, and I guess Kerry Hyder's back again.
Yeah.
He's just depth. He's not nothing special there.
Yeah.
But Austin Bryant might be one to watch as maybe like a D Ford speed rush replacement.
Yeah. Is he somebody do you feel like could unseat a starter and get in there somewhere, or a second or a backup possibly?
Maybe. I mean, I think maybe if Drake Jackson gets tired again, and can't finish the season, then it might open up for more people. But I think to start out, it'll be Drake Jackson getting the start across from
Because
Bosa.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but like when you're looking at the draft, your first rounder should be a starter. Your
Yeah,
second and third rounders are people that will compete for a potential starting position. Third rounders, I'm sorry, fourth and fifth rounders are players that compete for backup, and anything below that is depth. And I believe that's normally what. And again, I could be wrong here, but I've seen players that get drafted at at the back end, or undrafted free agents that come in and unseat players just because they didn't get all the opportunities that some of these other players got. So And you
Yeah,
know,
we've had some pretty crazy late round successes on the
yes,
Niners with
yes,
Kittle in the fifth, Dre Greenlaw in the fifth, Lenore in the fifth, Hufanga in the fifth, Elijah Mitchell. He's too injured to call a success, but when he plays, he's
yeah,
amazing. Sixth round.
yeah,
Yeah, no, we've definitely gotten lucky, or that's those are the ones that Adam Peters, I mentioned as somebody likes more than Lynch. He
hmm
gets a lot of credit for those late round ones. So does Rand Carthon, though, who went to the Titans. So
yeah.
we are a little worried about that defection.
So,
Um,
so do you ever worry about some of these role players within that administration getting picked up by other teams with opportunities to become general managers or do have a higher elevated position going to another team in the NFL? I mean, yeah, just based on what you're describing, I mean, you got guys that are good talent evaluators. Those are like gold anywhere in the NFL. And when you have somebody who can consistently evaluate players and bring those players in, get players that nobody else is looking at, and get the most out of them. I mean, that's you're definitely destined for bigger things if people are paying attention to that.
Absolutely, it's already happened, but we've also gotten a lot of draft picks out of it.
Mhm.
So whether it was our defensive coordinators or I just mentioned Rand Carthon going to the Titans, also Martin Mayhew went to the Commanders
Mhm.
or whatever they're being called these days. But
Horrible name, by the
we,
way.
yeah, we've gotten a slew. Well, apparently somebody from the Eagles owns the rights, so now they might have to change it
Yes,
again.
I hope so. That's horrible.
Indeed. So yeah, we've gotten a slew of third round compensatory draft picks. We had 3 this year. I think we're set for 3 again next year because we're gonna get 2 because of these formulas, and then Mike McGlinchey got 17.5 for with the Broncos. That'll be a third round comp pick. We would have got one for Jimmy G at 22 or 20. Well, knock on wood, we'll see. Actually, he still
If he
has to pass
passes
his
it,
physical.
yeah. If he passes
Yeah,
it,
if he does, we would have got one for him, but it was eliminated by Hargrave. So in the case that Jimmy doesn't get signed, then Hargrave would eliminate McGlinchey. So we might actually only have 2 for next year. I hadn't even thought about that till just now. But yeah, pretty wild.
yeah, it's really exciting, man. These are exciting times as we're getting closer. It's kind of cool to get to talk because I follow the Bucs so much, and it's kind of cool to talk about other teams and kind of go around the league a little bit before we get ready for the season. Uh, and I do want to thank you again for coming on. When is what time is your show, and when is your show coming on?
Um, I do shows all over the place. I used to do a weekly Wednesday show this time of day called First and Ted, but my co-host is taking a little break from podcasting. I do a weekly show on Fridays called Ballin' with Bash and Ted at 3 o'clock. But actually, this week I'm out of town on Friday, so we moved
Nice.
it to tomorrow at 3. I have a show tomorrow morning with a guy named Ty Alston. He usually does East Coast Red and Gold
Mhm.
podcast. So he'll be on at 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern tomorrow with me. That's probably it for this week. Bash tomorrow at 3 our time, 6 your time. Uh,
Okay.
Balling with
So
Bash and Ted.
sounds good then. Hey,
Yeah.
before we go, I do want to get your final thoughts. And again, this is Ted from Ted Talks Ball. Please, if you get a chance, follow him, like and subscribe to his channel. It's great. I love good football content, and I really think you do a great job, man. And I want to thank you for taking time to come on.
Gene, I feel the same way about you, and thanks for having me. I mean, shoot, I think I had you on twice. So it's only fair that I come on your show and get to know some of your folks. And too bad we don't play this season, but we can still get together and talk about football. I tend to follow most of the NFL. Niners closest, NFC West next, NFC overall, AFC contenders. Like
Yeah.
the kind of also runs the AFC. Maybe I'm not quite as up on, but I pay attention to most stuff going on in the NFL. I
Yeah,
try to.
that is awesome. Any final thoughts for the listeners out here?
I noticed that Bud Cannibalist said low expectations. I liked One Take Bake too. That was funny from talking about Baker's commercials.
Yeah.
But he said something about like low expectations. He feels good about it. our expectations aren't high, but then I was going to make a joke and say, I bet Bud Cannabis is high. So,
Yeah,
not in a bad way, but
yeah,
with a name like
listen,
that,
yeah.
I figure. But no, I mean, I think, yeah, like you said, low expectations. I think good luck with Baker and Trask. Maybe a little bit of rebuilding year for your Bucks. But the good news is that the NFC South is not exactly a powerhouse right now. I would say the Saints, probably have a real good defense. I think that Derek Carr will help them. I think he's as good as Jimmy G or maybe a little better and a lot less injury prone. And they've got some weapons with Olave and supposedly Michael Thomas is back. But
We'll see if
how it,
Slansky shows up.
we'll see how long Kamara gets suspended for
So,
and whatnot.
do you think he's going to get suspended? I am shocked that it hasn't happened.
I thought it sounded like it was brutal. I thought we're thinking 6-8 games at the least.
He beat that guy. He beat the brakes off that guy. And then there was the video where he kind of copped to it. So I don't know. I'm not a TMZ guy, but that does kind of affect, how this team plays and how they run things. So it will be interesting to see what they do.
No doubt. And the Panthers have their little, for number one overall quarterback. But, it takes usually a while to get used to the NFL. And I'm not a big fan of little quarterbacks, whether it's Brock Purdy I'm a fan of Purdy, but, Russ, Breeze, everybody throws these names out. I'm like, Russ and Breeze never won a ring after they got paid. Russ only did it with a historic D and prime beast mode. So, yeah, we'll see. I like the kid out of Stroud out of Ohio State a little bit better. And it sounds like he's doing really well. But regardless, so the NFC South, there's some opportunities for your Bucks, I think.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think the Saints will be tough, but and the Panthers kind of started to turn around last season, but we'll see. I don't really trust Frank Reich that well, so
yeah,
I think they would be better off if they had kept Steve Wilkes. So that's probably good news for you guys that he's gone.
Yeah, most definitely.
We'll see.
All right, my friend. I really appreciate you. And guys, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody in the chat. I will say this, we're getting closer to the season. I'm really working on consistency. We'll definitely have a lot more fan interaction this year, taking calls and, just getting your thoughts, because without the fans, without the listeners, the show just doesn't move like it should. So I really want to show that I appreciate you guys. I will go back to giving away T-shirts and stuff. We will go back to the hot seat, so you will see that this season, and that's something to look forward to. So, guys, definitely keep watching the show. It's going to get better. KB will be back week after next. I should have another special guest on next week, so be sure to stay tuned, and we'll definitely lock in more on talking about the Buccaneers and talking about the NFL as a whole. Be sure to check us out tomorrow, where we will have somebody from the New York Giants that will be kind of going over some of what they have going on, and as we go around the NFL. So definitely look forward to that. Again, Ted, thank you so much. And we are out of here. Everybody have a good week, and stay safe. Peace.
Thanks. Peace. Go.